The rain on Earth's outer colony never stopped. The sky was always gray, the ground always wet. Jace wiped mud off his boots as he walked into the small command post. He wasn't a soldier anymore, but something about the cold steel walls and quiet tension brought back memories. He had been through wars, lost friends, and buried too many regrets. Now he just worked jobs, boring ones, simple ones, the kind that didn't ask questions. But today's job was different. They didn't give him the full details, only said it was high priority, high pay, and very sensitive. He stood in front of the mission officer, a tall man with silver eyes and no smile. "You will be transporting a VIP," the officer said, "from here to the protected zone on planet Valari." Jace raised an eyebrow. VIP, as in a diplomat. The officer shook his head slowly. A royal exile. From the Zellar Empire, Jace felt a chill in his chest. The Zellar were known for their pride, power, and hatred of humans. "What's the catch?" he asked. "She doesn't know why." "She's being moved," the officer replied. "She thinks it's for her protection, and there are people who want her dead before she arrives," the officer said flatly. "You're not just a driver, Jace. You're a shield." Jace signed the contract, picked up the keys to his small freighter, and walked out without saying another word. It was just another job, just a few days across space. He could handle one spoiled alien girl, no matter how rude or cold she was. He reached the docking bay and saw her standing there, tall, slender, with silver blue skin and deep violet eyes that didn't blink. Her arms were crossed, her jaw tight, and her expression full of disgust. "So," she said without looking at him, "they send a human to carry me like cargo." Jace didn't respond. He just opened the ship's ramp. "If you want to live, get in," he said. She didn't like that. She turned to one of the guards and hissed something in her own language. The guard only nodded toward Jay's orders. He said, with a long breath, the alien girl walked up the ramp, her eyes avoiding Jace's the whole time inside. She sat in the back corner and pulled her hood low. Jace sat at the front, setting coordinates for their journey as the engines roared and the ship lifted off. He could already feel the tension filling the space between them. She didn't trust him, and honestly, he didn't trust her either. He knew what these kinds of missions really meant when someone powerful wanted you dead. Even space wasn't safe. An hour into the flight, a message beeped on his private screen. Unknown ship detected following at distance. Do not alter course. Orders will follow. Jace glanced at the message, then at the quiet girl behind him. She was staring at a small pendant in her hand, like it held her whole past. He leaned back in his chair and thought something wasn't right. Why would a powerful alien family send their daughter with no guards, no weapons, just one human to protect her? Why did she look more afraid than angry? He opened his encrypted tablet and pulled up her profile. Kailari Zelata, age 22 Earth years. Status, royal bloodline, exiled. Reason, classified. Jace cursed under his breath. Everything about this job was wrong. She wasn't cargo, she wasn't a diplomat, she was a target. And he was now sitting in a tin can with a walking time bomb. He checked the route again, then locked the doors manually. If someone came for her, they'd have to come through him. Kailari looked up suddenly, her eyes cold. "You're watching?" "Me," she said. Jace didn't answer. "You think I don't notice?" she added. "Humans are always the same, curious and weak." He finally looked at her, his voice calm. "No," he said. "I've seen enough to know that hate covers fear." She didn't respond. Just turned her head and looked out the window into the dark of space. But her fingers clutched that pendant tighter than before. Jace turned back to the console. The job had just started, and already it felt like a mistake. Still, deep inside, something told him this girl was running from more than assassins. And before this journey ended, he would find out exactly what. Kylari sat near the rear of the ship, silent as a shadow, her arms wrapped around her knees, her face hidden under her hood. She hadn't spoken a word since liftoff, and Jace was starting to feel the pressure of that silence. It wasn't normal silence, it was cold. Like a blade hanging above his head, ready to fall. He tried not to care. He reminded himself, this was just a job. Take the alien girl to the sanctuary, collect his pay, disappear again into the outer sectors. Simple, but nothing about her felt simple. Not the way she avoided looking at him. Not the way her fingers traced the glowing lines on her pendant. Like they were more important than breath. Hours passed, stars streaked by the window, and Jace kept an eye on the scanners. No signs of trouble yet, but space wasn't empty, and trouble rarely rang the doorbell. Kylari hadn't moved much, hadn't eaten, hadn't slept. She looked alert, like a hunted animal, always ready to run. But there was nowhere to run in the black void outside. Suddenly, something pinged on the radar. A ship, small, unmarked, tailing them at long distance. Not close enough to engage, but not far enough to ignore. Jace narrowed his eyes. Checked the ship's course, no mistake. It was following them. He didn't alert Kylar, didn't want to cause panic. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just a lost miner ship on the same vector, or maybe it was exactly what he feared. A slow alarm buzzed on the control panel. Gravity disturbance ahead. Jace sat up straight, hands gripping the controls. His stomach tightened. He knew that signature. Someone had activated a gravity snare trap in deep space. It was a classic. Pull the target out of hyperlane. Ambush them. Take what you want. The ship shook violently, pulled from its smooth flight, and hurled toward a small moon. The system screamed. Kylari grabbed the seat beside her. Wide-eyed and pale, her lips moved, but no sound came out. Just fear. Jace fought the controls with every bit of strength he had. He'd flown worse, dodged missiles, escaped collapsing cruisers. But this felt different. The pull was too strong, too precise. Someone planned this. Someone was expecting them. With a final slam, the ship crash-landed on the moon's surface. The metal hull groaned. Sparks danced across the console. Smoke filled the cabin. And then, silence. Not the cold silence from before, but the dangerous kind, the kind before the next explosion. He unbuckled himself and rushed to check Kylari. She was breathing, just shaken, her hands shaking, her voice barely a whisper. "Where are we?" she asked. For the first time, her tone wasn't full of "hey tits," was fear. "Toxic moon," Jace said, looking out the cracked window. "Atmosphere's poisonous to humans and Zolaria alike. We need to get moving before someone finds us." He handed her a mask, one he had patched together using old human gear and parts from the medkit. She stared at it like it was a dead animal. "You expect me to wear that?" she said, voice sharp again. "You want to breathe." He answered flatly. She hesitated, then took the mask, slipping it over her face with a disgusted hiss. They stepped outside into the burning air. The sky above them was red and thick with clouds. The ground cracked with every step and toxic. Winds howled through the broken canyons around them. Jace led the way, Kylari behind him, struggling to walk on uneven rocks. The ground was hot beneath their boots, and even with the mask, the air made their heads spin. He scanned for shelter. There was nothing but ruined metal ruins scattered across the land. Maybe an old research station. Maybe something worse. Growl echoed across the valley. Jace froze, raised his weapon. Kylari stood still, eyes wide. Then a giant shadow leaped from the rocks, a predator with 4 arms and black eyes. Roaring as it charged them, Jace fired once, missed. The beast was too fast, too close. Kylari screamed and fell back. Jace dropped his gun, stepped between her and the beast. his body the only shield he could offer. The creature's claws slashed across his arm. Blood flew. Jace groaned in pain but didn't move. The beast reared back to strike again, then paused, sniffed the air, and backed away slowly, vanishing into the mist. Kylari stared at him, stunned. Her voice soft, confused. "Why? Why did you protect me?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. He was breathing hard, clutching his bleeding arm, trying to stay upright. "Because I don't care if you hate me," he said finally, "but I'm not letting anyone die on my watch." She looked at him like she didn't believe it. Like no one had ever said that to her before. Maybe they hadn't. Maybe all she had known was betrayal and cold smiles. They found a shelter half broken, full of dust, but safe for now. Jace collapsed near the corner. Bleeding, tired, but alive, Kylari sat near him, closer than before, her eyes watching him silently. For the first time, the space between them didn't feel so cold. The night on the toxic moon was worse than the day, even inside the broken shelter. The walls groaned with every wind blast. Strange echoes moved through the metal like whispers from ghosts. Jace sat against the far wall, wrapping a bandage around his bleeding arm. The cut was deep, but not fatal yet. Kylari didn't sleep. She sat near the door, staring at the darkness outside every few seconds. She touched the edge of her breathing mask, making sure it was still secure. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but something else. Why would a creature like that back away? She asked suddenly, her voice low, like she wasn't sure if she really wanted the answer. Jace looked up at her, his voice dry. Could have been the blood, could have been the stink. "Maybe I'm just that scary." She didn't smile, but something in her eyes shifted, like a wall inside her was cracking. "You didn't have to protect me," she whispered. "No one else ever has." Jace didn't respond right away. Instead, he adjusted the heater coil to keep the air warm. It sparked, flickered, then steadied. Soft light filled the shelter, just enough to see each other clearly. Kylari removed her hood, her silver blue skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Her hair was long, braided with tiny silver ring symbols of her caste, her station, her past. She looked less like a princess now, more like someone lost, trying to stay strong in a world that wanted her gone. Jace finally said, "I don't need a reason to help someone. That's not how humans work. You're different from the ones I read about," she said. "The stories on my world said your kind destroys everything you touch." Jace let out a tired breath. "Some do," he admitted, "but most of us, we just try to survive, same as you." She looked at him, her gaze longer this time, as if she was really seeing him for the first time. Then she whispered, "I used to believe humans were beneath us. I was taught that from the moment I could speak." "What changed?" Jace asked. "I'm still figuring that out," she said quietly. Outside, a distant thump echoed something heavy moving nearby. Jace reached for his blaster and pulled himself to his feet, his muscles aching. Kylari stood too, silent and alert, like a predator sensing danger. "Back door," Jace said. "We leave now." They exited into the red mist. The wind had calmed, but the air still burned their lungs. The moon's gravity was lower now, unstable, like the planet itself was tired of holding together. They walked fast, heading toward a cliff where scanner showed an old underground tunnel. Maybe it once led to a mining outpost. Maybe nowhere. Kylari stumbled once, her foot caught in cracked ground. Jace turned to help. She pulled away quickly, but then, after a pause, let him steady her arm. Neither of them said anything, but something passed between them, something unspoken. They reached the tunnel, forced open the rusted hatch, and climbed down into darkness. The air inside was dry and stale, safer than outside. Jace activated a wrist light, revealing old tracks, rusted carts, and broken equipment. Kylari ran her fingers across the walls, reading the faded alien symbols. This place was abandoned long before your kind ever arrived, she whispered. My people once mined here for firestones. But then the air turned bad, and we left. Looks like nobody told the bounty hunters that, Jace muttered. They walked in silence for a long while, till they found a sealed chamber. Old but still functional. It had a working door and thick walls. They went inside, locked it behind them, and collapsed on opposite sides. Both exhausted, Jace leaned his head back, eyes half closed. If I hadn't been flying today, what would have happened? He asked softly. Kylari didn't answer for a while, then said, someone else would have taken the job. Someone who wouldn't care if I made it or not, and you still think I'm just a tool? He asked. Her voice dropped. No, she said, I think you're the only person who didn't ask me what I'm worth. Jace turned to look at her, and for the first time, she didn't look away. There was something strange about the air between them now. Not cold, not full of hate, but tense in a different way. As if the path ahead was no longer just about duty, but about choice. Kylari rested her head against the wall. Closing her eyes, Jace, she said softly, yeah. He answered, if I don't make it, thank you for treating me like I mattered. He didn't reply, just sat in silence, staring at her face, wondering why her words hit him harder than any wound ever had. The tunnel outside creaked again. Something was coming, and they would have to move soon. But for now, for this one quiet moment, they weren't enemies, weren't cargo and guard. They were just two souls, caught in a war neither of them started. The tunnel was silent, but Jace didn't trust silence anymore. Not in this place, not after what he'd seen. His blaster was warm in his hand, his injured arm stiff, but still working. He sat in the corner of the sealed chamber, watching the door while Kylari slept, or at least pretended to. He didn't blame her if someone had ripped his world apart. Sold him like cargo and left him to die, he wouldn't sleep either. His wrist screen flickered. Weak signal. Just enough to receive an old transmission from hours ago. It wasn't meant for him, but the encryption was familiar military code. Jace tapped it open, expecting a weather report or static. Instead, he heard one name, Kylari. He sat up straighter. The voice on the other end was male, rough, commanding, and full of venom. The package has gone off course. The human still has her. Send backup. Terminate the girl if retrieval fails. Jace froze. The message was old. Recorded before their crash, but it confirmed everything. This wasn't a transport mission, it was a cover for a hit. Someone high up wanted her dead, and Jace had been the unknowing escort to her execution. He looked over at Kylari, still, curled in the far corner, breathing steady. Unaware of the words that had just sealed her fate, his hand hovered over the comlink. He could report this, turn back, save himself. But something deep inside refused to move. It wasn't just about duty anymore. It hadn't been since the beast attack. Or maybe even before that. Kylari stirred, eyes opening slowly, catching the glow from his screen. What are you doing? She asked, her voice soft but cautious. He hesitated, then turned the screen toward her. Pressed play. Her body tensed as the voice repeated its cruel message. When it ended, she didn't speak. Didn't blink. She just sat still. Like a statue, Jace finally asked, why? Why would someone order this? Kylari looked at him with empty eyes, then said, because I was never supposed to leave. I wasn't exiled, was sacrificed. The words hung in the air like smoke, bitter and hard to breathe. Jace didn't push her for more, but she spoke anyway, her voice hollow. Like she'd told the story in her mind 1,000 times, but never out loud. My father made a deal, a treaty with a rival house. I was the gift, a bride to seal peace. But I refused. I escaped, and to hide the shame, they told the galaxy I was exiled. She stood slowly, walked toward him, her steps uncertain. "You were never supposed to get me to the sanctuary," she said. "They knew you'd die before. You got close. They knew I would too." Jace stared at her, something burning in his chest now. Not anger, not confusion. Rage, cold and sharp. The kind that came when you realized you'd been used, when someone marked you for death without even asking your name. "They didn't count on one thing," he said. "What's that?" She whispered. "I don't care what they want," he said, standing. "I'm getting you to that sanctuary. Even if I have to tear through every bounty hunter and assassin in this cursed system." Kylari blinked fast, as if the words didn't make sense in her head. No one had ever stood up for her before, not even her own blood. Then her hand reached forward, barely brushing his wounded arm. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "I treated you like dirt. I insulted your kind. I don't understand you, eh?" Jace gave her a tired smile. "That's the problem. Your people think humans are simple, but we're not. We don't follow rules when they're wrong. We don't leave people behind, and we sure as hell don't let traitors win." A loud thud hit the tunnel outside. The metal groaned again. Something was crawling through the underground. Kylari stepped back, face pale. "They're close," she said. Jace nodded, checked his weapon, then looked at her. "No more running," he said. "We fight if we have to." She swallowed hard, then said something in her own language, a word that sounded ancient and powerful. "What does that mean?" Jace asked. "It means I stand with you, no matter what comes." The lights flickered, the door rattled, shadows moved beyond the walls. They weren't alone anymore, and the real battle had just begun. The tunnel shook as something heavy slammed against the outer hatch. Kylari stepped back, her hands shaking, her eyes locked on the door like it was a beast ready to pounce. Jace moved slowly, blaster raised, his injured arm stiff but steady. He was breathing hard, but his voice stayed calm. "Stay behind me," he said, knowing she wouldn't listen, but saying it anyway. A second thud, louder this time. The door groaned and buckled. And then it stopped. Total silence followed, the kind that made your skin crawl. Jace stepped closer, his boots crunching softly on broken metal. He pressed his ear to the wall, nothing but stillness. Then his pop, silence again. They were breaching from the side. Jace spun, grabbed Kylari's wrist, and pulled her toward the back wall. He kicked over a rusted panel and revealed a maintenance shaft, narrow and dark, barely enough space for a human, and certainly not built for royalty. Kylari didn't hesitate this time. She climbed in after him, crawling through the black tube like a soldier, like someone who finally knew what was hunting her. They emerged in a storage chamber full of ancient mining suits and broken lights. Above them was a ladder leading up to the surface. Jace helped her climb, covering her as she moved. Every second felt longer than the last. Once outside, the air burned again. Red sky overhead and wind slicing like blades. But it was better than being buried beneath the moon with killers at their heels. Jace spotted a ridge in the distance, where a signal beacon blinked faintly through the fog. "We make it there. We call for help," he said, already limping toward it. They didn't speak. No time for words. The ground beneath them cracked. With each step, the moon was dying beneath their feet, and someone was using it to bury secrets. A low whine came from above. Kylari looked up and froze. "Hunter drone," she said, voice sharp. Jace aimed, fired once. The drone dodged, circled, scanned, then shot a beam that barely missed them. He grabbed Kylari and dove behind a boulder, their bodies hitting the rock hard, dust flying into their masks. Kylari winced, her shoulder bleeding. Jace pulled a charge grenade from his belt, armed it, and waited. The drone came lower. Scanning again, Jace stood, exposed, threw the grenade directly into its path, and ducked. The explosion shook the ground. Fire filled the sky, and the drone's wreckage rained down around them. Kailari coughed, crawling to him, her voice weak. You did it." Jace didn't answer, just nodded, then helped her up again. They were both hurting, both bleeding, but still alive by the time they reached the signal beacon. Jace's legs were nearly giving out. Kailari was limping worse. Her breaths short and painful, but her eyes were wide, focused, determined. The console at the beacon was dead. Powered down, no signal, no light. Jace slammed his fist into the panel. Come on, he muttered. Kailari stepped forward, pulled something from her sleeve, a glowing shard with a royal crest on it. She inserted it into the panel's core, and the beacon flared to life. Ah! Message pinged across the system, a distress call sent to any nearby ship, but the response that came back was not what they expected. Your location is known. You will be retrieved shortly, by order of House Valzar. Kalari's face turned. Cold, my father's house, she whispered. They found us first. Jace didn't like the sound of that. Not one bit. We need to leave, now, but it was too late. A sleek black ship broke through the clouds, descending like a hawk, its wings wide and deadly. Soldiers in silver armor stepped out before the ramp even touched the ground, their weapons already raised. All pointed at Kailari. The lead soldier removed his helmet, revealing pale eyes and sharp features. Not Zalari, not human mercenary, trained to obey. Never question Kailari Zelata, he said. You are ordered to return under charge of treason against the throne. She stood tall despite her wounds. You have no authority on this. Moon, he smiled coldly. We don't need authority, just confirmation. He turned to Jace. Step aside, human. Your contract ends here. Jace looked at Kailari, then back at the soldier, and stepped forward, not aside, his voice low. Steady, dangerous, you'll have to go through me. The soldier raised a brow. Why throw your life away for her? Jace didn't answer with words. He raised his blaster and fired. The shot knocked the soldier back. Chaos exploded. Kailari dropped to the ground as more weapons lit up the air. Jace took cover behind the beacon, returning fire with everything he had, even as bullets sliced past his ears. Kailari grabbed one of the fallen weapons. Something changed in her eyes. No longer just a scared girl, but a fighter, a survivor, and she stood back to back with the human who refused to leave her behind. Together, they fought like one. Not for duty, not for money, but for each other. The beacon crackled behind them, half-burned, smoking, still sending a weak signal into space. Around it, Bodhi's lay scattered mercenaries with silver armor. Twisted and broken, Jace stood in the middle of it all, his arm bleeding again. Smoke rising from his weapon, chest rising and falling like a beast that had just finished its final battle. Kailari was beside him, her once pristine cloak torn, hair falling loose from its braids, her face streaked with dirt and blood. But her eyes, they were alive now, bright with something that hadn't been there before. Hope they didn't speak at first, just stared at the wrecked field, waiting for another wave to come. But the sky remained quiet, and the moon beneath their feet rumbled no more. Finally, Kailari turned to him, voice rough and trembling. Why did you stay? You could have left me to them. Jace looked at her, his face hard but honest. I'm done watching people get thrown away. She swallowed, nodded slowly, and then whispered, You should know something. Before this ends, he looked at her with narrowed eyes. Go on. I wasn't just a royal bride-to-be, she said. I was supposed to inherit something dangerous, a secret known only to my bloodline, something the Empire wanted to keep locked away. Jace frowned. What kind of secret? She reached into her sleeve and pulled out the glowing shard she had used earlier. But this time, she held it differently, pressing it into the skin above her wrist. The shard melted into her skin, forming lines of light across her arm, ancient symbols moving like rivers of fire. Jace stepped back slightly, surprised but not afraid. "What is that?" "The key," she said, "to a hidden vault buried deep on Valari. With technology older than any empire, power that could end wars or start new ones. And they didn't want you reaching it," Jace said. Kylari nodded. "My father planned to marry me off, kill me quietly, and then send someone else to retrieve the key from my remains. That's messed up," Jace muttered. Kylari sat on a flat stone, breathing slowly, her voice softer now. "But then you came along, just a human, with no reason to care. And somehow you changed everything." He sat beside her, wiped the blood from his cheek, and smiled slightly. "Yeah, I have that effect sometimes." She turned to him, eyes searching his face as if seeing him again for the first time. "They'll keep coming, Jace. This isn't over." "I know," he said, "but now we fight on our terms." Before she could respond, a sharp beep came from his wrist. "Come." Signal, strong and steady. A civilian freighter passing nearby had picked up their distress call and was diverting course to assist. It wasn't military, but it was real, and it meant a way out. Jace stood. "We need to move. They're coming in fast, and this place isn't safe." Kylari hesitated. "Will they trust me?" "They don't have to," Jace said. "They just have to trust me." As they moved toward the extraction point, Kylari stopped and looked back at the field of broken armor. "I killed today," she whispered. "For the first time, Jace." Turned, nodded slowly. "Sometimes survival leaves no choice, but it still hurts." She added. He stepped closer. "It should." They boarded the freighter minutes later, helped inside by a wide-eyed old captain who couldn't stop staring at the strange pair, one human, covered in blood, and one glowing alien girl with fire in her veins. Once inside, Kylari collapsed onto a seat, exhaustion finally taking her. Body Jace sat across from her, hand pressed to his ribs, wincing every time the ship shook from launch. She looked at him through half-closed eyes. "Where will you go after this?" "I don't know," he said. "Back to drifting? Maybe you could come with me," she said suddenly, her voice soft but serious. Jace blinked, unsure if he heard her right. "You want me to follow you into an empire that tried to kill you?" "No," she replied. "I want you to help me destroy the part of it that still wants to." He leaned back, whistled low. "That's a big mission." "I don't want a guard," she said. "I want someone who stands. Even when he's outnumbered, even when no one's watching. Someone who makes people believe again." Looked into her eyes, saw the weight behind her words, and didn't look away. The ship pierced the upper layers of the moon's sky, stars opening up around them like an endless path. Kylari's hand rested beside his on the metal bench. It's close enough to touch, but not quite there yet. Still, the distance between them had never been smaller. The freighter drifted through open space like a tired bird crossing its last storm. Inside, the air was quiet but heavy with unspoken thoughts. Jace sat near the window, watching the stars blur by, his injuries wrapped, his weapon cleaned, and resting at his side, ready just in case. Kylari stood alone near the navigation screen, her fingers tracing the holographic path toward Valere, her home planet, her prison, and now possibly her battlefield. She looked different now, not because of the blood and dirt washed from her skin, but because something deep inside her had changed. Her spine straighter, her voice steadier, her eyes focused not on escape, but return. "You sure about this?" Jace asked, not moving from his seat. She nodded slowly. "The sanctuary was never the end, Jace, just a hiding place. I don't want to hide anymore." He watched her quietly, then stood, stretched his arms, wincing as pain shot through his ribs. "And what happens when we land? You walk up to the gates and announce war," she said. "I walk up with proof, with power, and with a human who survived everything they threw at him." Jace chuckled under his breath. "So, I'm part of your grand plan now." "You were always part of it," she replied, voice barely above a whisper. "You just didn't know yet." The ship pinged, arrival warning flashing on the screen. They were minutes from orbit. Valari loomed ahead like a sleeping monster, beautiful, bright, and dangerous all at once. Kailari stepped forward and touched his hand. Her fingers cool, her grip light. "Before we land, there's something else you should know." Jace raised an eyebrow. "Another secret?" "No," she said. "Something simple." He waited, and then she said it. "You saved me." "But you didn't just protect my life. You changed it." Jace looked into her eyes, saw no lie, no confusion, only the truth, plain and raw. "I didn't do it for a reward," he said. "I know," she replied. "That's why it means more." The freighter shook as it entered the atmosphere. Alarms blinked, but neither of them moved. The heat outside rising fast, like the world below was angry to see them return. Jace gripped a support rail. "What's the plan?" Kailari pulled the shard from her arm, now fully glowing, now humming like it could speak. "We walk straight into the palace," she said, "and show them that exile didn't break me. It made me, and if they shoot first." Jace asked. She looked at him with a calm expression. "Then we shoot back." The ship landed in a restricted zone outside the capital. Already Kailari's signal was being tracked. She expected that. Jace expected that too. But neither of them slowed down. Not when armed guards appeared. Not when drones hovered low. Not even when loudspeakers blared warnings into the sky. "Kailari Zelata, you are ordered to surrender at once." The voice echoed, cold and flat. She stepped forward anyway, holding the shard in the air, her voice rising, firm and clear. "This is the voice of the rightful bloodline. And I return not as property, but as power." The air around her shimmered. The shard responded, sending out waves of light that struck the guards' visors, disabling them one by one. Some collapsed to their knees. Taze stood beside her, weapon lowered, not out of arrogance, but out of something else, faith. Faith in her. Within minutes, the gate to the palace opened. Not by force, but by command. And inside, the court stood in stunned silence as Kailari walked down the steps she once ran from. Her head high, her face steady, and a human beside her who had no titles, no birthright, and yet held more honor than any man in the room. Her father did not appear, not at first. Not until she spoke the ancient words only royal heirs were taught. Words that could summon judgment upon a king. When he did come, his face was pale. Not from fear, but from realization that the girl he discarded had returned not as a broken thing, but as a storm, and the human at her side was not her bodyguard, but her chosen. There was no battle, no grand fight, just silence, followed by power shifting like a tide that could not be stopped. Later that night, in the quiet garden once closed to her, Kailari sat beside Jace under glowing trees, both of them finally still. "What happens now?" he asked. "We rebuild," she said, "but this time, I'm not alone." He looked at her, smiled. Never were. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in her life, Kailari wasn't running, wasn't hiding, wasn't pretending. She was exactly where she was meant to be. And destiny, strange and cruel as it had been, had led her straight to the one soul who saw her not as a burden or tool, but as someone worth fighting for.